has many rules, as we all know, and many of them are not that intuitive. But those rules and the complicated nature of applying those rules to individual claims should not work against veterans. After all, Congress and the courts have routinely said that the system is supposed to be veterans-friendly, non-adversarial. When in practice, sometimes we see these rules working against clients, it's important that we as VA-accredited attorneys and practitioners do what we can to advise our clients on how to avoid those denials based on technicalities.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one thing that I really want to talk about in this segment is starting with the initial claim stage, right? And specifically with form requirements, because a lot of veterans view the VA, and it is, a veteran-friendly system, but actually with the form requirements, you can't just write out your claim on a napkin, so to speak. You can't just write it out on anything. You actually, based on the regulations, one of those regulations is 38 CFR 3.155, must be using the specific forms that VA has prescribed for the specific types of claims. So that's a very important thing to do. Make sure that you're filing your initial claims on the right claims in order for the VA to accept your claims, frankly.
Exactly. And another aspect of that is timing, right? When to file the claim. And it's critically important because the time that a veteran files the claim oftentimes dictates the effective date that's assigned to that benefit. And the effective date that's assigned to the benefit therein dictates how far back VA will pay a veteran when they grant the claim and then pay retroactive benefits. And so the timing of when to file a claim is critically important. And we see this as a pitfall that veterans often trip up on as they're going about the VA claims process. There's something known as an intent to file form, and it's essentially a placeholder document that allows for veterans to file, and as of the date that they file the intent to file form, it preserves an effective date for any potential claim so long as the veteran finishes the process and files a claim within 1 year from the date that they file the intent to file form. And so sometimes we see clients come to us and they filed an intent to file form known as an ITF, and maybe it's from 2 years ago and they still want to file a claim in relation to that ITF. And, that's something they get confused about because in their mind, they filed that placeholder ITF, but they're outside the window now to actually file the claim in relation to that ITF to preserve that earlier effective date. Or veterans don't realize that they have the ability to file the ITF at all. And so, they either submit a claim and it could have been, they waited to submit the claim because they didn't have all the evidence that they thought they needed, or they needed to do more research, or they needed to reach out to the right person in their mind to handle the claim when they could have a year earlier submitted the ITF, locked in the effective date, and ensured that they were going to get paid the most retroactive benefits possible. And we're talking about the difference of potentially thousands of dollars in retroactive benefits that could disappear for tripping up on not knowing exactly when to file those forms.
Absolutely. And another big area where we're seeing timing come into play is with when you can submit your evidence, right? So the evidence that you need to support those claims. And we're really seeing this become even more impactful now that we are in the Appeals Modernization Act, or the AMA, because in the AMA, you can select certain lanes, certain evidentiary lanes, and each of those lanes has its own unique rules. Some of those rules are if you can submit evidence at all, for example, in higher level review, you don't submit any new evidence. In other lanes, you can submit evidence, but there are very strict deadlines for when you're allowed to submit your evidence. For example, if you're in the hearing lane, you can submit evidence 90 days after you attend the hearing. These are specific rules, special to just the hearing, or to the lane that you select. So it's important to know these rules before you you select the lane, but also once you're in the lane to pay attention to them, because it really does impact your likelihood of success. If you can't submit evidence to support your claim, you're less likely to be successful in actually having that claim granted.
Yeah, absolutely. Another common pitfall that we see very frequently, unfortunately, just because of the complexity of the system that veterans are forced to navigate, is completeness of the submissions that are required from VA to claim, appeal, or even just submit regular responses for information that VA is requesting. Form and general submission completeness is a big issue. Anyone that has looked at a form from VA realizes that there are numerous small boxes you need to check off or not check off, fields you need to fill out or not fill out, areas where you need to recognize that, they're highly technical documents, things that need to be completed and done fully for VA to take it in, process the document, establish a claim in their system, and then actually work it and adjudicate it. And this is a big pitfall veterans fall into, because a lot of times they have the form 95% completed the correct way, but they forget to check off a box that says that this claim is in relation to compensation, for example, or they forget to include the date of the prior decision on a supplemental claim appeal form. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, that's enough for VA to reject the form submission that the veteran is submitting. And not only does that lead to aggravation and delay, it can lead to outright denials. And a lot of times, veterans just don't really understand why their claim has been rejected, why VA is asking for more information, why VA is asking for them to redo the form that they already submitted. And a lot of the information and requirements for completing the form thoroughly and completely are, it's all fine print, right? So it's challenging. And a lot of times this results in veterans' claims and submissions being rejected on technicalities, not on the merit.
Yeah. And another area where we really see a lot of challenges for veterans is, after that initial claim period, it's when we are actually filing appeals. So if something was denied, or if your decision wasn't, granted to the fullest extent, you will appeal those. But we've talked about timing a bit, but I think it's worth mentioning timing again. Timing comes into play with these appeals again. There's deadlines set with appealing your decisions. Generally, it's a year if you're going to select a supplemental claim or higher level review or an appeal to the board. But it's important to take a look at those, the back page of those rating decisions or whatever the decision is. Take a look at what your appeal options are and how much time you have to file them, because if you don't file within that prescribed amount of time, you have lost your effective date, which is something that we had on before. But yeah, it's important not just in the initial claim period, but throughout this appeal system that you continue to abide by those strict deadlines.
And it's not just deadlines to submit appeals. As you spoke about a little bit earlier, the deadlines for submitting evidence or knowing when you can and cannot submit evidence as it relates to different appeal options is critically important for veterans to understand and apply in their case. It's something we see veterans get tripped up on all the time. They try to submit evidence with a higher level review appeal. As you mentioned earlier, you can't do that. Or they submit a supplemental claim appeal as an example, and they don't submit any new or relevant evidence at all. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's a requirement. That evidentiary submission is a requirement with a specific deadline for doing so for filing that type of appeal option. So I know we hit on that before, but it's really something that we see veterans sometimes struggle with and or just forget how to submit things or when to submit things. And so keeping those deadlines in mind is really important.
Yeah. And they carry over right through that appeal stage, just like how our form requirements carry over. So we talked about the strict filing requirements for initial claims. There are also requirements for notices of disagreement. And if the wrong form is used, it could result in your claim being pushed back, them asking you to resubmit it on a new claim. It all goes back to what we've been talking about, this whole time, which is mistakes that are really based in technicalities that veterans need to be careful of, because it can result in losing your effective date or a denial, just like a catastrophic end to your claim.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think the major takeaway here is from this discussion is that oftentimes veterans' claims and appeals are denied based on, obscure technicalities, form requirements, things that have nothing to do with the merit of the underlying case. And that's what can be so frustrating about these types of cases, is that navigating VA's rules often are just as important as proving the underlying case, and denials often arise from a veteran's failure to strictly adhere to all those procedural rules. I strongly recommend veterans reach out to a VA-accredited attorney, and they will be in a better position to understand these rules, apply them, and know when they don't need to be applied to a veteran's case, and navigate the process in a way that a lot of times veterans are unable to do so on their own.